The sound of the lock clicking shut echoed like a gunshot through the silent hallway. It was a final, metallic sound, the sound of a prison sentence being served. Inside the narrow closet under the stairs, 7-year-old Leo huddled against the cold wooden floor, his knees pulled up to his chest. The darkness was absolute. It pressed against his eyes, heavy and suffocating. There was no sliver of light under the door, no crack in the frame, just blackness. Outside, he could hear the heavy, deliberate footsteps of his stepfather, Mark. Each step was a statement of power. Then came the voice, that deep, smooth voice that sent shivers down Leo's spine. 3 days, Leo, Mark said through the door. His tone wasn't angry, it was terrifyingly calm, almost cheerful. 72 hours. That should be enough time for you to think about what you did to my statue. No food, no water, just you and the dark. If I hear a single sound, a single cry for your mother, I will make it a week. Do you understand? Leo bit his lip until it tasted of copper to keep from sobbing. He nodded in the dark, even though Mark couldn't see him. He knew better to answer. Good, Mark whispered, tapping the door frame twice. See you on Sunday. Leo heard Mark walk away. He heard the living room TV turn on. He heard the sound of a beer can being cracked open. And then he heard the most painful sound of all, the silence of his mother, Sarah. She was out there, somewhere in the house. Leo knew she wanted to help him. He knew she was probably crying in the kitchen right now. But he also knew that Mark had broken her spirit long before he locked Leo in this closet. Fear was the ruler of this house, and Mark was its king. To understand how a 7-year-old boy ended up locked in a closet for breaking a piece of porcelain, you have to understand Mark. To the outside world, Mark was a pillar of the community. He was a successful real estate agent with a winning smile and a firm handshake. He drove a silver Mercedes, wore Italian suits, and donated to the local animal shelter. The neighbors thought Sarah was the luckiest woman alive to have found a man who would take in a single mother and her son. But monsters rarely look like monsters. They don't have claws and fangs. They have charm and money. Mark's abuse was insidious. It started with small things, a pinch here, a harsh word there. Then it escalated to psychological warfare. He controlled the finances, he controlled who Sarah could talk to, and he hated Leo. Not because Leo was a bad kid, but because Leo was proof that Sarah had a life before him. Leo was a rival for her attention. The incident had happened just an hour ago. Leo had been dusting the living room, trying to earn his allowance, trying to be useful so Mark wouldn't yell. The statue was an ugly, abstract thing made of black marble. Mark claimed it was worth $5,000. Leo had barely touched it, but the shelf was loose, something Mark had promised to fix for months. The shelf tilted, the statue slid, gravity did the rest. The crash was deafening. When Mark ran into the room, he didn't scream. He just stared. That was worse. He stared at the shattered pieces, then at Leo, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a predator who finally had an excuse to hunt. "You clumsy little parasite," Mark had said softly. "That cost more than your mother makes in a year." Sarah had begged. She had thrown herself between Mark and Leo, weeping, promising to pay for it, promising to glue it back together. Mark had simply backhanded her, a sharp, practiced motion that sent her crumbling to the sofa. Then he had grabbed Leo by the collar and dragged him to the closet under the stairs.
Now, inside the closet, time began to lose its meaning. The first few hours were the hardest. Leo's stomach was tight with fear. The air was stale, smelling of old coats and mothballs. It was getting cold. Mark, in his cruelty, had turned the air conditioning down to 60 degrees. The cold seeped through the crack under the door, chilling Leo to the bone. He wore only a thin t-shirt and shorts. He curled into a tight ball, trying to conserve body warmth, trying to imagine he was somewhere else. He thought about his real dad, a man he only knew from photographs, a man with kind eyes who had died before Leo could remember him. "Is this where I go to meet you, Dad?" Leo whispered into the darkness. Outside the house, the sun was setting on the first day. Mrs. Higgins, the elderly neighbor next door, was watering her petunias. Mrs. Higgins was 70 years old, with sharp eyes and ears that missed nothing. She had seen Mark drag Leo into the house earlier that afternoon. She had heard the crash. But now the house was strangely quiet. She walked her small dog, Barnaby, close to the fence separating their properties. She paused. Usually she could hear Leo playing video games or practicing his reading aloud. Today, nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioning unit running at full blast. "Something isn't right, Barnaby," she muttered to the dog. She looked at the window of the living room. The blinds were drawn. She felt a prickle of unease at the base of her neck. Mrs. Higgins had lived long enough to know that silence in a house with a child was rarely a good sign. But what could she do? She had no proof. So she went back inside, but she didn't sleep well that night. Back in the closet, Leo had fallen into a fitful sleep. He woke up shivering uncontrollably. His throat was parched. Thirst was already setting in. It had been, 6 hours? 12? He couldn't tell. Then the smell hit him. Pepperoni and melted cheese. Outside the closet door, Mark had set up a small folding table. He was eating a large pizza, intentionally wafting the smell towards the cracks. Mark said loudly, talking to no one in particular. "This is the best pizza I've had in years. Too bad we don't have anyone to share it with, right, Sarah?" Leo heard his mother's muffled sobs from the kitchen. "Mark, please," she whispered. "He's just a little boy. He needs water." "He needs discipline," Mark roared, slamming his hand on the table. The sound made Leo jump in the dark. "You open that door, Sarah, and I swear on my mother's grave I will put you in the hospital. Do you hear me?" "Yes," she whimpered. "Yes, I hear you." Leo covered his ears. He didn't want the pizza. He just wanted his mom to be safe. "I'm okay, Mom," he whispered, too quiet for them to hear. "Don't make him mad. I'm okay." The first night passed. Then the morning of the second day. By the 24th hour, the hunger was a dull ache, but the thirst was sharp and burning. Leo's lips were cracked. The darkness began to play tricks on his mind. He saw flashes of color that weren't there. He heard whispers. He started to cry, but no tears came because he was too dehydrated. He huddled in the corner, amidst the winter coats hanging above him like ghosts. "God?" Leo whispered. He didn't know much about God. They didn't go to church often because Mark said Sunday was his day for golf. But his mom had taught him a prayer once. "God,
If you're there, I'm scared. I'm really hungry. Please don't let me die in here. Mom needs me." As the words left his lips, the atmosphere in the closet shifted. It was subtle at first. The biting cold from the air conditioner seemed to retreat. The stale smell of mothballs was replaced by something else, a scent like fresh rain on dry earth, like blooming lilies, like ozone after a storm. Leo opened his eyes. The closet was no longer pitch black. A soft golden light was emanating from the far corner of the closet. It wasn't coming from a bulb or a phone. It was coming from the air itself. The light grew brighter, warmer, but it didn't hurt his eyes. It was comforting. And then the closet, which was only 3 feet by 4 feet, seemed to expand. The walls felt like they were moving away. In the center of that light, a figure appeared. It was a man. He was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, just like Leo. He wore simple clothes, a white robe that looked woven from light itself. His face was not scary. It was the kindest face Leo had ever seen. Eyes that looked ancient but full of youthful energy, eyes that seemed to hold the entire universe within them. Leo wasn't scared. Strangely, he felt safer than he had ever felt in his entire life. "Hello, Leo," the man said. His voice was not a whisper, but it didn't travel outside the door. It resonated directly inside Leo's chest. Are you an angel?" Leo asked, his voice raspy. The man smiled, and the closet felt like it was flooded with sunshine. "I am a friend. I heard you calling. You said you were scared." "I am," Leo admitted. "Mark locked me in. I broke his statue." "I know," the man said. He reached out a hand. "But you are not alone anymore, and you won't be hungry much longer." The man produced a piece of bread from nowhere. It looked like ordinary bread, but when Leo took a bite, it tasted like honey, like warm milk, like his mother's hugs, like everything good he had ever known. He ate, and the pain in his stomach vanished. The man gave him a cup of water, a simple wooden cup. Leo drank, and the burning in his throat was extinguished. He felt strength returning to his small limbs. "Who are you again?" Leo asked, feeling sleepy now, but a good kind of sleepy. "I am the one who watches over the fatherless. I am the one who hears the cries of the innocent. Sleep now, Leo. I will stand guard. No harm will come to you in this place." Leo curled up, resting his head on the man's lap. The floor was no longer hard wood. It felt like soft grass. For the first time in years, Leo slept without fear.
Outside, the second day turned into the second night. Mark was pacing the living room. He was agitated. He had expected crying, begging, scratching at the door. That was the fuel he thrived on. He wanted to hear Leo suffer so he could feel powerful. But the closet was silent, too silent. Is he dead? Mark wondered aloud, a flicker of panic crossing his face. Not because he cared, but because a dead body was a liability. He pressed his ear to the door. He heard humming. It was a low, melodic sound, a lullaby. But it wasn't Leo's voice. It was a man's voice, a deep, rich baritone that vibrated through the wood. Mark jumped back. "Who's in there?" he barked. Silence. "Sarah!" Mark screamed. "Did you let someone in? Is there someone in the closet with him?" Sarah ran in from the kitchen, her eyes red and swollen. "What? No, Mark. You have the only key. You've been watching the door all day."
Mark grabbed the key from his pocket. His hands were shaking. He unlocked the door and threw it open, ready to confront the intruder. Darkness. Just darkness. Leo was curled up on the floor, fast asleep. There was no one else. Mark blinked. He looked around. I heard a man singing, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's your guilty conscience," Sarah dared to whisper, though she immediately flinched, expecting a blow. Mark slammed the door shut again and locked it. "You're crazy," he spat. "Nobody is in there. The boy is delirious. He's hallucinating. Good, let him go crazy." But Mark couldn't shake the feeling. He went to the kitchen and poured himself a stiff drink, then another. He couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt like he was being watched, not by the police, not by Sarah, but by something bigger, something angry. Day 3 arrived, the final stretch. Mrs. Higgins was now convinced something was wrong. She hadn't seen the boy for 3 days. She had seen Sarah take out the trash, looking like a ghost, moving like a robot. Mrs. Higgins decided to act. She called the non-emergency police line. "I'd like to request a welfare check," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The house next door. I think the little boy is in trouble." Inside the house, the atmosphere was suffocating. It was the 72nd hour. The deadline was up. Mark stood before the closet door. He had a smirk on his face, but his eyes were nervous. He expected to find a broken child, a boy who would be so traumatized he would never disobey again. He wanted to see the fear in Leo's eyes. "Time's up, little man," Mark announced. "Lesson over. Let's see if you've learned respect." Sarah stood behind him, wringing her hands, praying that her son was still alive. Mark put the key in the lock. Click. He turned the handle. What happened next defied all laws of physics. Mark didn't just open a door to a closet. It was as if he opened the door to a blast furnace of pure white light. The light didn't just shine, it exploded outward. It was blinding, brighter than the sun, yet it cast no shadows. The force of it knocked Mark backward. He fell onto the living room floor, shielding his eyes, screaming, "My eyes! My eyes!"
Sarah gasped, but she didn't look away. To her, the light wasn't painful, it was beautiful. And from that light, Leo stepped out. He didn't crawl out, he didn't stumble, he walked out. He looked healthier than he had 3 days ago. His cheeks were rosy, his eyes were bright. He wasn't dirty, he wasn't thirsty. In his hand he held a small wooden toy, a carving of a lion, that hadn't been in the closet when he went in. But Leo wasn't alone. Behind him, the light coalesced into a figure, tall, powerful. The stranger from the closet stepped into the living room. The air in the house changed instantly. The temperature dropped, then rose again, stabilizing at a perfect, peaceful warmth. The smell of alcohol and stale fear that usually permeated the house was replaced by the scent of incense and thunder. Mark scrambled backward on the floor like a crab until his back hit the sofa. He looked up at the stranger, and for the first time in his miserable life, Mark felt true, primal terror. Who are you?" Mark stammered. "How did you get in there?" The stranger didn't answer immediately. He looked at Sarah. He nodded gently, and a wave of peace washed over her, breaking the invisible chains of fear that Mark had wrapped around her for years. She ran to Leo, hugging him, checking him over. "Oh God, Leo, you're warm. You're okay." "I told you, Mom. My friend has been taking care of me." Then the stranger turned his gaze to Mark. It wasn't a gaze of hatred. Hatred is a human emotion. This was a gaze of judgment. Absolute, unyielding, divine judgment. It was the look of a king looking at a traitor. "You asked for silence," the stranger said. His voice shook the glass in the window frames. "You demanded darkness. You wanted to trap a child in a box to make yourself feel big." I was disciplining him," Mark shouted, trying to summon his old arrogance, but it sounded pathetic. "It's my house. He's my responsibility." "He is my child," the stranger roared. The light intensified, flaring around him like a cloak. "All the little ones are mine, and you touched one of mine." The stranger took a step forward. Mark tried to stand up, tried to run, but he found he couldn't move his legs. "You like small spaces, Mark. You like the feeling of being trapped, of being unable to speak, unable to move, unable to ask for help." No, please," Mark whimpered. "You spent 3 days trying to break a spirit. You used your body to intimidate. You used your voice to terrify. So I will take them from you. Not your life. Death is too easy. I will take your power." The stranger reached out a hand, not to touch Mark, but simply pointing at him. "Be still." 2 words. Mark gasped. His body went rigid. His arms locked at his sides, his legs stiffened. He tried to open his mouth to scream, but his jaw clamped shut. He tried to blink, but his eyelids felt heavy and slow. He was frozen, fully conscious, fully aware. He could see, he could hear, he could feel the itch on his nose, the cramp in his foot, the terror in his heart, but he could not move a single muscle, he could not speak a single word. He was a prisoner in his own body, a closet of flesh and bone. The stranger looked at Mark one last time. "You will have a long time to think, Mark. Years, decades perhaps. You will be fed. You will be watered. You will be cared for better than you cared for this boy. But you will never lift a hand in anger again. You will never speak a cruel word again. You are now the statue, silent, still."
Just then, the sound of sirens wailed outside. Blue and red lights flashed through the window. Mrs. Higgins had come through. The front door burst open. 2 police officers rushed in, guns drawn, with Mrs. Higgins right behind them. "Police! Everybody hands in the—" The lead officer stopped. He lowered his gun. He blinked. The room was normal. The blinding light was gone. The stranger was gone. There was just Sarah, hugging her son on the floor, crying tears of relief. And there was Mark, sitting against the sofa, staring straight ahead with wide, terrified eyes, rigid as a board. "Ma'am, are you okay?" the officer asked, holstering his weapon. Sarah looked up. She looked at the empty space where the stranger had stood. She looked at the wooden lion toy in Leo's hand. She looked at Mark, who was screaming behind his eyes, but silent to the world. "Yes, officer," Sarah said, her voice strong for the first time in years. "We are safe now. We are finally safe." The paramedics examined Mark. They were baffled. "It looks like a massive stroke or some kind of catatonic state, locked-in syndrome maybe. It's instant. I've never seen anything like it." They loaded Mark onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, his eyes darted frantically to Leo. He was pleading, he was begging. But Leo just watched him go, holding his mother's hand. "He can't hurt us anymore, Mom," he said quietly. Sarah looked down at her son. "No, baby, he can't. Who was that man in the closet?" Leo looked at the wooden lion. It was carved from olive wood, smooth and ancient. He smiled. "He said he was a friend. He said he's always watching." Months passed. Sarah sold the house. She took the money, Mark's money, which he could no longer spend, and bought a small cottage near the ocean, far away from the memories of the closet. Mark resides in a state-of-the-art long-term care facility. The doctors say his condition is a medical mystery. He has perfect brain function. He feels pain, heat, cold, and itching, but he cannot move. He stares at the ceiling all day. Sometimes the nurses turned on the TV for him, but mostly he is left in silence. Sometimes at night, when the lights go out in the hospital ward, Mark thinks he sees a soft light in the corner of his room. He hopes it's the stranger coming to release him. But the light never comes closer. It just watches. A reminder. Every action has a reaction. Every cruelty has a consequence. Leo grew up to be a carpenter. He still has the wooden lion. He never felt afraid of the dark again, because he knew that even in the deepest darkness, the light is there, waiting to be found. And for those who use their strength to hurt the weak, remember the story of Mark. Remember that there are eyes watching you that you cannot see, and there is a justice that cannot be bribed, cannot be bullied, and cannot be stopped. If you believe that children are precious and should be protected, like this video. If you believe in divine justice, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about the moments when heaven touches earth. Remember, you are never truly alone.